Two teenagers with murder on their minds, detailed plans of how they were going to carry out a heinous crime, spearheaded by a 15-year-old girl, but between her and her 15-year-old male friend, they developed a list of 5 names. One of them was Brianna. Brianna Ghey was born on the 7th of November 2006 to her mother Esther and her father Peter Spooner. She lived in Birchwood near Warrington in the northwest of England. Brianna was actually born a boy, but she'd been living as a girl for 2 years before her death. Her mother Esther said that Brianna was fearless to be whoever she wanted to be. And her dad described her as a beautiful girl to be proud of, and that his heart bleeds every day for Brianna, and this will never go away. Brianna was complex. She was outgoing and bubbly on the one hand, and that certainly comes across in her online presence. But she also suffered from anxiety, and her school in Birchwood had accommodated this. They allowed her to start later and end the school day a little earlier, and she did her work in the inclusion room, and this is where she met one of her killers. Only named on the day they were sentenced, that was the 2nd of February 2024. Troubled teens, both only 15 years of age, Scarlett Jenkinson from Warrington and Eddie Ratcliffe from Lee, were the pair who'd plotted behind Brianna's back to get her to go to a park with them where they'd planned the deed to take place. On the morning of the 11th of February 2023, Scarlett Jenkinson texted Brianna to make sure that the plan was still on. Scarlett had arranged to meet Brianna in the nearby town of Culcheth. She told Brianna which stop to get off at, and Scarlett met her with her friend Eddie Ratcliffe. Brianna and Eddie didn't know each other. Unbeknownst to Brianna, Eddie had been plotting her demise for weeks with Scarlett. Scarlett perhaps had no idea how brave Brianna had to be just to leave the house on her own. Her anxiety meant that she spent a lot of her time indoors. The amount of trust that Brianna put in Scarlett would be admirable had it not been for the evil intention that Scarlett had for friending Brianna and luring her to her death.
I don't think she'd never been on a bus by herself before. I was really proud that she had done that.
She had anxiety and all that anyway, you know, and to have that trust with someone who's meant to be a friend. And she took, you know, brave enough to go on that bus. Like, you read how she sent a message to her mum.
I said how good it was, and that, yeah, but I wish I'd have said more. I wish I had told her that I was proud of her.
And the thought of her just on that bus, not realising what's going to happen, it's just very difficult. I don't think I could ever get it out of my head.
Brianna left her house for the final time about 12:45 p.m. When she got off that bus, her fate was sealed. The three of them walked to Linear Park. Once in the park, Brianna was led to a spot already chosen by Scarlett. It was up some steps and near a bench. This was a busy Saturday afternoon. The pair of them had absolutely no shame, and shockingly were able to stab Brianna 28 times. There were defensive wounds on her arms, showing that she tried to defend herself from the merciless attack. Brianna, once on the ground, the pair were stooped over her. They were surprised by a couple walking their dogs. They ran away across a field, and the couple tried their best to administer first aid. The first responding police officer was there in minutes, and he tried desperately to keep Brianna alive. Sadly though, just after 4 p.m, she was pronounced dead, and the hunt was on for the killers.
You are under arrest on suspicion of murder. Obviously you are under caution, so anything you say is getting recorded. Okay.
Confirm me being suspect is because I was the last person I've seen the robbery. How come I'm a suspect?
Pardon?
How come I'm a suspect?
How come you're a suspect?
Because I'm the last person I've seen, or is it?
I don't know. All the information I've received is you are a suspect. Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Ready, you're under suspicion of murder, alright? You didn't have to say anything, but you may harm, you don't mention when questioned. See you later on in court, and if you do so we have, do you understand?
Yeah. Hang on, let's unlock these.
I can't explain it.
No, listen.
Right, listen.
Do it all on into, alright? You're going to take to the corner, you'll be interviewed about it, to ask you questions, alright?
Yeah.
Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe met at age 11 because they both went to the same high school. Scarlett had grown up in a nice family. Her mother was a teacher. Her father worked in construction. As a young child, there was nothing to lead people to believe that she would go on to be a monster. Scarlett was troubled through her teenage years, though. She'd started to self-harm, and from about the age of 13, she became absolutely fascinated with horror movies and serial killers. That in itself isn't indicative of the mind of a killer or impending doom, but she progressed in a way that probably only a very small minority of people do. She found the dark web, and she started to frequent what are known as red rooms. And these red rooms are basically online torture chambers. There's real murders, real tortures that are featured in these rooms. And Scarlett loved it. She revelled in it. She was excited by it. Eddie, on the other hand, was a shy kid who, again, like Scarlett, came from a decent family. His mother was a graphic designer. His dad was a martial artist. Eddie himself was a decent kickboxer. It seemed to be, though, as their friendship got deeper, they would lead each other on. Much of their text messaging that was discovered during the investigation was teenage-like, innocuous, boring even. But some of it was really, really alarming. They'd started to talk about killing people. They'd actually focused on a boy initially. Scarlett had befriended him, but he'd ended up blocking her on social media because, I don't know, she must have come across as being really weird, which she was. Brianna, however, was trusting. And it was when Scarlett was expelled from her school that Scarlett and Brianna first crossed paths. Scarlett had actually been at Birchwood School, where Brianna went, for only 10 weeks. She'd been taken on by that school due to being expelled. She was expelled, actually, for handing cannabis gummies around in school. So she was actually lucky to be taken on by another school. She was classified as a vulnerable student, and she was doing work in the inclusion room. And this is where Brianna did her work. So this is how they met. The head teacher has given an interview and said that she personally met Scarlett twice, and she didn't believe that Scarlett and Brianna were really close friends. But Scarlett had found out that Brianna was transgendered, and this fascinated her, not in a good way. And behind Brianna's back was talking to Eddie about her. Eddie, in his text messages, came across as being very transphobic. He wouldn't use the female pronoun. He would talk about Brianna as it. Brianna ended up on their kill list. They'd actually arranged to meet Brianna a week or so before, but those plans fell through. So the day was set for Saturday, 11th of February 2023. Even though their planning between themselves seemed meticulous, it was incredibly naive. They'd not tried to hide their communications. They'd committed the murder right in the middle of a busy Saturday afternoon, and they were seen leaving the scene. But Scarlett had tried to cover her tracks. She'd been texting Brianna's phone as if Brianna had stood her up. And she came out with the story that Brianna had gone to meet, instead of meeting her as arranged, she'd gone to meet a strange man, a 17-year-old from Manchester. Scarlett's mother actually called 999 to give the police this news. She was giving in a tip. Unfortunately for Scarlett, though, that was stage one of her downfall, because just 36 hours after the murder, both Scarlett and Eddie were arrested by Cheshire Police simultaneously in their homes. Scarlett and Eddie were interrogated, and on the 15th of February, both of them were charged with murder, refused bail, and placed in youth detention. Next day, they appeared via video link to a brief hearing at Liverpool Crown Court. Both had tried to turn on each other. Eddie said that it was Scarlett who did the killing, that he panicked and he ran away. Scarlett gave a whole range of stories. At the sentencing on the 2nd of February 2024, the judge, Justice Yip, noted just how many different stories Scarlett had told. Both of them pled not guilty. They were taking this thing to trial. The trial commenced at Manchester Crown Court on the 27th of November 2023. Due to their age, both of them only 15 at the time of the murder and 16 at the time of the trial, there was reporting restrictions put in place preventing naming them, and we've only found out their names and their faces a couple of days before I'm recording this video. During the trial, Scarlett Jenkinson was referred to as X and Ratcliffe as Y. That's why on the surveillance footage you see X and Y. While in custody, both of them had gone through a series of psych evaluations. Scarlett was found to have traces of autism and ADHD. However, it was also noted that she had a conduct disorder, which is what psychologists diagnose, kind of like a pre-personality disorder diagnosis, if you will. Many people who are diagnosed with conduct disorder as children go on to get diagnoses of certain personality disorders, usually antisocial personality disorder. But it was noted that she suffered from a complete lack of empathy. There ain't no coming back from that, in my opinion. Eddie Ratcliffe was diagnosed after his arrest with autism. He'd actually been teased by his brother for being autistic, even though he'd never been diagnosed. He developed selective mutism during the pre-trial phase, and to this day, as I understand it, he will only talk to his mother. He was allowed by the court to give his evidence and to be cross-examined via written communication by typing on a computer, which I've never heard of before, but they accommodated that. During the trial, the prosecution had a relatively easy time because they had all the evidence of the planning. The court found out that Scarlett had previously tried to murder Brianna by poisoning her, which failed, but Eddie had given some tips on how she might do it better next time. So it was clear that both of them were active participants in that planning phase, although it was led by Scarlett. The defence for Eddie Ratcliffe said that it was all Scarlett, that it was her that had led the planning. It was her that had told him to bring his hunting knife that had been bought by his dad for him for a present, okay? And it was her all along that was going to use Eddie's knife to stab Brianna. Scarlett's defence, however, held that, well, yeah, she had lured Brianna to the park. She hadn't actually participated in the killing itself, and that was all Eddie. All she was doing was engaging in a fantasy, but it was Eddie who had taken it and actually made that fantasy a reality. The defence went so far as to accuse Eddie of being a sociopath. You know, they really went all out to save Scarlett. The trial lasted 3 weeks, concluding on the 20th of December 2023, and the jury, after deliberating for 4 hours and 40 minutes, declared both defendants, Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe, guilty of murder. Mrs. Justice Yip, the judge, said that life sentences would be forthcoming, and she said that even though both of them were minors, she would allow their names and their faces to be made public on the day of their sentencing. And that's exactly what she did.
I have weighed all the aggravating and mitigating factors that apply to each of you. Although I have taken the same starting point, I have concluded that the final minimum terms must be different. In Scarlett's case, the aggravating features are significant and would have led to a substantial uplift to the starting point, but for the mitigation, particularly that relating to maturity and mental disorder. There must still be an uplift, but it will be moderated. In Eddie's case, I find that the balance to be struck between aggravating factors, which are not quite as high as in Scarlett's case, and the mitigation I have identified, is such as to cancel each other out. In saying that, I have taken account of all the medical evidence and accept the diagnosis of ASD has some impact, but the extent to which it reduced your culpability in the circumstances of this offending is limited. This was undoubtedly a very serious offence with multiple aggravating factors. That is the context in which I impose minimum terms which are lengthy for offenders of your age, albeit significantly less than an equivalent sentence for an adult. The parole board will have to decide if and when either or both of you can be released. That will only happen if you no longer pose a danger. If you are released, you will remain on licence for life and you may be recalled to prison. I will now sentence each of you. You may remain seated. In both cases, the relevant statutory surcharge will apply. Scarlett Jenkinson, for the murder of Brianna Ghey, you will be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. I set the minimum term at 22 years, less the 352 days that you have spent on remand. Eddie Ratcliffe, for the murder of Brianna Ghey, you will be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. I set the minimum term at 20 years, less the 352 days that you have spent on remand. Please take the defendants to the cells and their legal teams will come and see them before they go to begin their sentences. Thank you.
My opinion is that this is one of the most shocking crimes in the UK in recent years. It's the equivalent of Venables and Thompson, the two lads at age 10 who murdered little 2-year-old Jamie Bulger back in the 1990s. It's absolutely terrifying what these two kids did, what they planned, and the fact that they carried it out to its completion is just, I just have no words. I have no words for it. I don't know what went wrong in their lives. I don't know whether they would have gone on to become murderers if they'd never met each other. I kind of think that Scarlett is the one that is the most troubled and the one that I don't want to see released. Eddie, I'm not sure about. I think Eddie is redeemable, but Scarlett, just that absolute lack of empathy. Nah, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I just want to give my heartfelt condolences to Brianna's family and friends. What a horrible crime. I have absolutely no words for. So I'm going to stop talking